name is Cassie, and this is the Mystery Meeting Chamber. Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to discuss the Natalee Holloway case. Back in 2005, Natalee Holloway had disappeared on a graduating senior class trip to Aruba. To this day, it is still unsolved and her whereabouts are unknown. So, let's dive in. Natalee Ann Holloway was born on October 21st in 1986 to parents Beth and Dave Holloway in Memphis, Tennessee. In 1993, however, her parents did divorce and Beth Holloway got custody of both her and her younger brother. In 2000, Beth Holloway remarried to a prominent businessman from Alabama, George Jug, that's his nickname, Twitty. The family moved to Mountain Brook, Alabama together, and this is where the kids attended school. Natalee attended high school at Mountain Brook. Her classmates would describe her as very lively, but also very serious at the same time. She was very focused on her future. She actually got a full scholarship to the University of Alabama for pre-med. She was a part of a lot of extracurricular activities with the school, as well as helping out with several different charities. In May of 2005, the graduating class of Mountain Brook decided to plan a trip to Aruba, and this was kind of like a rite of passage that the seniors would do every year. Her stepbrother had actually gone prior, and two of her step cousins were going this year with her. At first, her dad was a little bit hesitant about it, but together the parents agreed to let her go on this trip. She said that she would be safe and would always stay in a large group of friends and not to worry about her. On May 26, 2005, the senior class arrived in Aruba with 7 chaperones. There was roughly 124 students, which is about a third of their graduating class went. She got a room at the Holiday Inn with the other students, but her room was on the ground floor with 3 of her friends, Ruth, Lee, and Catherine. They spent a lot of their time going to the pool at the hotel, the casino that was on a level above them, and going out to the beaches and some of the nightlife and bars. The drinking age in Aruba is actually only 18, so this graduating senior class, with the majority of them being 18, were allowed to let loose and party and drink and go to bars, where at home, they can't. Natalee wasn't known to be a drinker, but since they were on vacation and they just graduated, she decided to celebrate with everyone else. It is said that her drink of choice while she was there was Diet Coke and Bacardi 151. 151 has a really high proof, being 75% alcohol, so someone with her size, which was about 110 pounds, that alcohol is going to affect her pretty strong. It was actually said that one night after going out to the bars, her friend had to help walk her back into the hotel because she was just too drunk. May 29th was going to be their last day in Aruba, so when they woke up, they decided to go out to the beach and really enjoy the nice warm weather and the view. Around 6 p.m., they headed back to the hotel to get ready for that evening. They had dinner and went up to the casino on the second level of the hotel. One of Natalee's friends was playing blackjack, where she struck up a conversation with a guy sitting next to her. He said that his name was Urin and that he was on vacation from Holland and he was 19. She was doing kind of bad in blackjack and was asking for some handy tips so she could get some money. After receiving some tips on playing, Ruth actually won $100 and decided to call it a night at the casino. Ruth and the friends, including Natalee, had invited Urin to come hang out at the poolside. Urin joined them at the pool for a drink, but said he had to leave pretty quickly afterwards. The girls had asked him to meet them later when they head out to Carlos and Charlie's, which was a local bar that was popular with a lot of the tourists, including all of the students on this graduating class trip. He said he wasn't sure if he could make it, but he would try. Shortly after 10 o'clock, the girls got ready and headed out to go there. They had actually tried to hop on a bus to go, but since they had drinks on hand, they wouldn't let them on there, and they hailed a cab and made it down there. The majority of the occupants at Carlos and Charlie's that night were all the students on their trip. It was said that there was probably over 60 of them in that one bar. Around midnight, Jorn had showed up with two of his friends at Carlos and Charlie's. It is said that he started dancing with Natalie out on the dance floor and was seen having drinks with her at the bar. Carlos and Charlie's actually closes at 1 o'clock, so it was a mad rush for everyone to get out and figure out what they were doing next. It is said that the streets were filled all with 80 plus students in the streets just, switching bars or figuring out if they're heading back to the hotel or not. One of Natalie's friends, Lee, said she couldn't find her in the crowd and checked some of the other local bars to see if she had popped in there with anyone else, but she couldn't find her. She went back to the hotel eventually and stayed in the lobby until 3 a.m. and never saw Natalie come in, and eventually she had to go to sleep. When the girls woke up the next morning, Natalie hadn't came into the hotel room. Her bed was still made, and her luggage was still there. All of her items were still there. It had not looked like she entered the hotel room at all. At first, they thought maybe she had switched rooms with someone. A lot of the other students had been flip-flopping rooms and just heading into whatever group of friends that they were with that night and just all crashing in the same room. So they hoped that that's what it. They started getting ready and packing up their things and headed down to the lobby where they were all meeting to head out to the airport. Their flight was going to be at 3 p.m. that day, and the chaperones were doing a head count. Natalie still wasn't there. She was the only one missing. One of the chaperones decided to stay back and wait for Natalie to arrive, and another one had called Natalie's parents to let them know that she was missing and she was not going to be boarding the flight back. Some of the students had claimed that they saw Natalie the night prior in a car, and she leaned out the car and shouted, "Aruba!" seemingly intoxicated but having fun. They figured that she was probably getting a ride back to the hotel. Cabs in Aruba aren't actually marked as taxi cabs or anything like that, like we have here where they have the little marker on the top. So they weren't sure if it was a cab or if she was, in someone's random car. A couple other students said that they heard that she wanted to go cruising with Euron and his two friends. Since Natalie was nowhere to be found, one of the chaperones that stayed back decided to go to the local police station and let them know that was going on and to report her as a missing person. But they told her, "No, sorry, you can't report her missing for up to 24 hours. She probably just got drunk or lost track of time and she'll show up. Don't worry." And the chaperone was not happy about this. When Natalie's mother got the phone call, she was actually just getting back home from a trip and was still in the car. She immediately turned around and headed to the airport. She actually got pulled over by a police officer, explained what was going on, and he very nicely let her off without a ticket and gave her contact information for an FBI agent that he knew. One of the chaperones had actually met a drug enforcement agent who was in Aruba for the weekend, and she told him the story, and he himself actually contacted the FBI to let them know what was going on. Beth, her husband Jug, and some of their friends chartered a plane and arrived in Aruba around 10 p.m. that night. The police had actually sent escorts for them to get them through customs quicker and in so they could figure out what was going on with their daughter. Beth had previously been told that the last person to have seen her daughter was these boys, and they said that one of their names was Uran. So when she got to the hotel, they asked the hotel if they knew anyone by the name of Uran and if he was checked into the hotel. While there was no guest under that name, the hotel knew who he was. They said, "No, he's not a student. He's not here on vacation. He actually lives here, and he frequents the hotel and the casino a lot." Beth had asked them if there was any way she could see the surveillance tapes so she could get an image of who this guy is, so she could go around asking people if they've seen him or her daughter. While walking the streets, she actually found someone and gave them $100. He said, "Yeah, I'll give you his full name. It's Uren Vandersloot, and he's not 19. He's 17 and goes to the high school with me." Beth had taken this new lead to the police, but they were a little bit hesitant about it. After getting into a slight argument with the police over this, they eventually agreed to take her and her husband up to the Vandersloot's home around 2 a.m. Uren actually wasn't home when they arrived, but his father did answer the door and said that he would call him to get him to come home to come talk to them. It didn't take very long for Uren to show back up, but he showed up with one of his friends, Deepak, which was one of the two guys who was out with them the night prior, the night Natalie disappeared. At first, Uren said, "I don't know her. I don't know what you're talking about." But eventually he did admit that he knew her. He said that Natalie wanted to see the sharks, so they all went out to a spot where he could show her some sharks, and they took her back to the hotel around 2 a.m. And she was a little drunk, but they got her into the hotel. It was fine. On May 31st, Uren and brothers Deepak and Satish were taken into the police station for formal statements. While this was all happening, Beth and her friends had gathered 100 and something tourists and locals to do a ground search for Natalie to see if anyone could find her. She made a poster pleading for her daughter to call her and put her local number on there, and eventually they made it seem kind of like her daughter ran away by pleading for her to call her, so she quickly changed it to kidnapping on the posters. Natalie's father, Dave, had finally showed up in Aruba after not being able to get an earlier flight in. He went to the 4 different police stations, and very upsettingly, he said that 2 of them didn't even know who Natalie was and hadn't heard what was going on. He joined in the search for his daughter on ground. The Aruban police had obtained footage from outside of the hotel to prove that Uren, Deepak, and Shatish's story was a lie. There is no footage saying that she ever came back to that hotel that night. So, this means that these 3 are now the number 1 suspects. Several tips were being called into the police station in regards to this, including one tip that said that 2 hotel security guards from a different hotel were seen at the Holiday Inn where Natalie was staying and was hitting on some young blonde American girl. And this actually led to them being arrested. These are the first 2 suspects to officially be arrested in the Natalee Holloway disappearance. During the ground search, a blood-soaked mattress was actually found on one of the beaches, and they had to run forensic tests on it, but it did eventually come back that it was not human blood on the mattress. On June 9th, Uren, Deepak, and Satish were taken back in for questioning. Deepak stuck to his story. Satish said, "I'm not speaking," claimed his right for silence. And Uren pretty much stuck to his story as well, but added in that he thought that Natalie was making some racist comments, which this has never been confirmed. For some reason at this time, Uren was actually transferred to a different police station for further questioning, while Deepak and Satish stayed there for their questioning. The police had used the tactic of saying that Deepak and Satish, they're brothers, they're not going to turn on each other. Uren then decided to ask for a lawyer and said, "You know what, yeah, I'm not being truthful." He told them then that he actually got dropped off first, before Natalie was taken back to the hotel, and that if the brothers did something, they should go check out the warehouse garage where he normally parks his car, because they would probably find some evidence there. The Calpro brothers, Deepak and Satish, were told that urine was actually turning on them, and Deepak decided to adjust his statement. He said that Uran actually asked them to stop the car and get out, and said that he would walk Natalie back to the hotel from there alone. His brother Satish actually backed up Deepak about the statement as well. Uran actually changed his story again to make it match a little bit more to the Kapal brothers' story, but saying that he took her to the beach on the walk back and that he wanted to have sex, but he didn't have a condom on him. So Natalie was like, no, I'm not about it, and that they were hanging out at the beach and he wanted to leave around 3 a.m., but she didn't want to, so he said, I'm leaving, and left her at the beach and called Deepak to come pick him up and take him home. And then Uran added that Deepak must have gone back afterwards, knowing that Natalie was going to sleep on the beach and he must have raped her or did something to her. So this area of the beach was actually thoroughly searched, and a nearby pond was drained, but no evidence was found that anything happened. After finding digital information saying that Deepak was at home and on his computer, Uran again changed his story, saying, oh no, I was wrong. It wasn't Deepak who picked me up. It was Satish. So his story just keeps changing and changing and changing. So they actually found more digital evidence as well, saying that Uran was home and that there was only about a 3-hour window from being home and when they were last seen with Natalie for all of this to go down. So the police are now starting to think maybe there's more people involved in this as well. A man named Steve Crow, on his complete free will, had actually gone to the police station earlier, claiming that he saw Uran, Deepak, and Satish drop off Natalie at the hotel. And knowing that she was never dropped off the hotel made it seem like he was an additional suspect to the boys' story. 4 people had actually said that they saw Steve at Carlos and Charlie's that night that Natalie disappeared as well. On June 18th, while being questioned by the police, he did admit that he lied, but he had heard the story and pretty much just repeated it to the police because he himself believed it to be true. Steve was eventually held in the police for 10 days, but let go due to lack of evidence. The Calpo brothers were also released a little bit later on July 4th, also due to lack of evidence, but Uran was still being held. On July 17th, on one of the ground searches, a piece of duct tape was found on the beach with several blonde hairs, and they had actually sent that out to Quantico, Virginia to get DNA testing. A couple days later, it came back and it was not Natalie's hair. Uran's father was also arrested at some point and held for 2 days because he initially claimed that he had picked up Natalie and Uran from a McDonald's that night, which was a lie. Uran's father is actually a well-known lawyer and a judge in training in Aruba. I should also mention that Uran's godfather was also the chief of police at the time. Tips kept coming in to the police station, including a homeless man saying that he saw someone dump a body in the local landfill. A fisherman claimed that that night someone had stolen a lobster cage and a knife from him that he previously did not report to the police. And someone else said that they saw the 3 boys in a car on a dirt road with a mound of dirt next to the car, as if something was freshly buried there. The mound of dirt and the landfill was looked into, but for some reason the lobster cage, which was actually big enough to put a human body in, was not looked into. the police said that there's no information to find there. On August 26th, the Kapal brothers were arrested again, but released a few days later because they actually didn't have any more evidence to hold them. Uran was finally released on September 3rd, and he immediately left and went back to his hometown in the Netherlands. While back home in the Netherlands, he actually started contacting reporters to get paid for his story and to say that he was telling the truth this time. In reality, he had a gambling addiction and wanted more money for that. There was a reward for any information for Natalee Holloway, and it had gotten all the way up to $1 million at this point. After spending several months in Aruba, Beth finally went home. In October, she actually got a pretty chilling voicemail from a private number saying, "Mom, help me." FBI took this in and did a voice analysis with other recorded tapes of Natalie and proved that it was not her and just a really sick hoax on Natalie's mom. Dr. Phil actually got into this case and sent a investigative team to Aruba to see what kind of information he could find. He had someone set up hidden cameras and get an interview with Deepak, and they aired this on TV. But unfortunately, it made it seem Deepak was totally involved. He had information. And the Aruba government actually went after Dr. Phil, saying that you are purposely doing this to make him look bad, released an unedited version of this tape, and the answers to the questions were not the answers that he had given in the real tape version. A lawsuit was filed, but eventually dropped. A girl who actually saw this segment on TV contacted Natalie's family and the FBI because she was in Aruba a week prior to this and actually got attacked on the beach by the fisherman's hut. A half-naked man had actually tried to run after her, but she was able to get away. She was able to give a description of this guy, and the police went back and were trying to figure out who he was. Eventually, they brought pictures of several different people to her, and she said, 100% it is this man that attacked me, without a doubt. Strangely enough, the man that attacked her was actually already in an Aruba police station being held for an expired visa. But by the time the U.S. government was trying to go there in order to get him on charges for attacking this woman and also question about the Natalee Holloway disappearance, the police had actually already let him go, and he fled back to Colombia. At some points, it was also suggested that Natalie had been sold into sex trafficking or into the pornography world. There was a guy named Mr. Pink who was looked into, who was known for having a website showing tours of different brothels and the best places to get sex to go while visiting Aruba. Unfortunately, nothing turned up with this gentleman. The case is really starting to slow down at this point now. Less leads were coming in, less information. It was going cold. In December of 2006, Beth and her husband, Jug, actually got a divorce. And for the first time in a year and a half, Natalie's room was finally touched and packed up. They had not moved anything. All of her clothes were still laid out where they were. All of her pictures and banners on the wall. And it's now being taken down. So we're going to jump time a little bit to November of 2007. New evidence had emerged on the computers confiscated by the police of Deepak Shatis and Uran, and all three of them were arrested again and questioned. However, yet again, there was not enough evidence to actually continue to hold them, so on December 7th, they were released yet again. Later this December, a fishing trap was seen in the water, and someone said that they saw a human skull in it. Divers went out to retrieve the fish trap, but nothing was actually found inside, so it was another empty lead. In February of 2008, a Dutch reporter actually claimed that he had solved the Natalee Holloway case. He said that he had proof that he knows what happened. He had footage of Joran talking to an ex-convict and now current businessman. In this footage, Joran actually explains to him what happened. He said that he was having sex with Natalie on the beach when she started to seize up, choked on her own vomit, and died. He had called his friend Dory, who had a boat, to come help him dispose of the body in the sea. The cops actually contacted Dory after this, and he completely refuted the statements. After this had aired, Joran claimed that, no, I was lying. I was just trying to seem cool to this guy and, increase my rep, essentially. And because he said he was lying, the police said that there wasn't enough to arrest him on the statement that he made. Zoran felt that there was too much pressure and light on him, and he actually fled the country and went to Thailand for several years. There were claims that he was selling girls into sex trafficking, making $13,000 per girl that he sold off. The same Dutch reporter said that he had footage of this as well. Currently, nothing is going forward with these allegations, but I think that's something that a bookmark is being put into. In November of 2008, he reached out to a U.S. reporter and asked for an interview where he could get paid $25,000 and he will tell the truth of what happened to Natalee Holloway. They were a little hesitant at first since he had been known to lie several times over, but they gave him a partial payment and flew out to Thailand to interview him. He said that earlier that year, in 2005, a mysterious man had approached him and asked if he could help him find a blonde that he could have. Joran said that he initially wasn't going to do anything about that, but after meeting Natalie, he called this guy, said, "I have the perfect blonde for you." He lured her out to the beach and put her on a boat where she started freaking out that Joran wasn't getting on the boat with her, and she was being sent off to Venezuela to be sold into sex slavery. He wanted to come out now and tell the truth because maybe they can still find her and she could still be alive and he could stop holding on to this guilt that he has. After the film crew left, he ended up emailing in saying, "Just kidding, I was lying," again. But they decided to air it anyways, just to show the public how much of a liar Joran actually is, and that he just has no remorse and will say anything. He got paid for another interview where he was being shown on TV on a polygraph test and being questioned. The test results, of course, came up negative because he was lying the whole time and he ran off stage but still got paid. In February of 2010, Joran's father had actually passed away from a heart attack and he left Thailand to come back home to Aruba to help out his mom. Then on March 29th, he had sent an email to Beth's lawyer saying that for $225,000, which is just a portion of the reward money, that he will tell her the true story of what happened to Natalie because he really needed the money to help out his mom. In May of 2010, the lawyer had flown to Aruba with $10,000 in hand to give to Euron, and they did a test transfer of $100 to his bank account to make sure it worked, and then did another $15,000 to his account in the Netherlands. This time, he claimed that Natalie had died and that he called his father and they buried her body underneath the foundation of a house that was being built. After doing some investigation, it was actually shown that this house was still just a plot of land and not in the process of being built back in May of 2005. So again, another lie from Euron Vandersmoot. After the lawyer had flown back, Euron had sent him another email saying, "Sorry, I lied again and I just needed the money." He left a note for his mother saying that he was going to Peru to take a part of a poker tournament that was being held in Lima. On May 30th, 2010, exactly 5 years since Natalie had gone missing, Euron had met 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez at the casino playing poker. She had already won $10,000 in the tournament but wanted to become a better player, and Euron had told her that he could give her some tips if she wanted to come back to his hotel room and play some online poker there, and she agreed. Surveillance tape actually shows both of them getting into her truck and going back to his hotel. Surveillance footage from the hotel show both of them entering into the hotel room. A few hours later, it is shown him leaving to go get breakfast, coming back to eat it, grabbing his stuff, and leaving again. When he left the second time, he told the attendants at the front desk to let his girl sleep and not to bother her. This hotel room was actually getting flagged after he had left because there was a non-payment and it was now overdue. So the hotel had taken one of their master keys and had gone to the hotel room to open it, and unfortunately when they opened the door, they had found Stephanie's body in the room. Euron was actually on the run now and had fled to Chile, but on June 3rd, he had been captured and brought back to Lima. He initially claimed that 2 people had came into the room and attacked them, but he managed to escape, and that is why he was running, because he was afraid for his life. The surveillance footage denied his claim because they could show that no one else besides him had entered in the hotel room. And then he explained what happened. He said that he was giving tips to Stephanie in the hotel room while she was using his laptop to play online poker. A message popped up saying, "I'm going to kill you, Mongoloid." And she asked you what that was about. And he claimed that, oh, it's just about the whole Natalee Holloway thing. And in Peru, they didn't actually really get news of the Natalee Holloway disappearance, so she Googled it while on his computer and realized that he was a suspect for her disappearance and freaked out and punched him. And this enraged him, and he swung and hit her in the face with his elbow, and there was so much blood, and he just essentially blacked out and strangled her, and there was blood all over his shirt, so he took his shirt off and then smothered her and killed her, and then he fled. But with the surveillance showing that he left to go get breakfast and come back, he actually ate his breakfast in the room after she had already passed. He was arrested and was going to be held in prison until his trial. The autopsy report came back and it showed that it did not go the way that he said. She was beaten to death. She had marks and bruises all over her body, and it had to have been quite a violent attack. On June 27th, 2010, while Uran was still being held until his trial, an indictment from the U.S. was filed for wire fraud and extortion for trying to get money out of the Holloway family for his story. Unfortunately, this was going to be put on pause while he was pending trial in Peru for the murder of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. Later in 2010, in November, a couple who was visiting Aruba had actually found a partial jawbone laying on a beach with a wisdom tooth still attached to it. Forensics went over this, and unfortunately, showing Natalie's dental records, she had already had all of her wisdom teeth pulled, so this was not hers. And due to the weathering of the jawbone, it was undetermined of who it actually was. In January of 2012, Uran's case finally went to trial, and he pled guilty for murder. He was sentenced to 28 years in jail and had to pay $75,000 to the Ramirez family. The Peruvian government said that after Uran faces his 28 years, they will hand him over to the U.S. government so he could face the charges of the wire fraud and extortion. The day after Uran's court hearing on January 12th, Natalie's family had to make the heartbreaking decision to finally declare her officially dead. This is because that she still had different things tied up in her estate, and they wanted to use any of the remaining money for her younger brother and his schooling and for his funds. While Uran was still in jail, he met a girl who was visiting a family member at the same prison as he. He was allowed conjugal visits with her where she actually got pregnant, and they married in 2014, and shortly after she gave birth to their child. A little while after this, he had actually threatened the warden's life and was transferred to a higher security, lower quality prison. His new wife had tried to submit claims that he has changed his life and believes in God now and is trying to get him into a better circumstance or transferred to a different prison. In 2016, a new suspect actually had emerged from this case. An informant had claimed that he was roommates with a man named John Ludwig, who was close friends with Uran. John Ludwig had claimed to him that Natalee Holloway had OD'd, choked on her own vomit, and Uran's father had buried her behind a house. Then in 2010, Uran, who thought it was too hot and that it was finally going to come down on him, had contacted him, asking him to move the body. They then took her bones and smashed them up as much as they could, put it into a sack with some dog bones, and took her and the dog to a crematorium where they paid him $200 to allow him to push the sack into the kiln themselves to be cremated. They then took the ashes and rented a boat and poured them out over the sea. Some bone fragments were actually found, 4 different bone fragments, but none of them showed any DNA match to Natalie, and only one of the 4 bones had any kind of human DNA associated with it. Later in time, John Ludwig had actually tried to attack his ex-girlfriend with a knife, and in a complete self-defense mode, she was able to get the knife from John Ludwig and stabbed him, and he passed away later in the hospital from the wounds that he sustained in this accident. So no further information will ever come from John Ludwig about what might have happened. Joran has also been caught smuggling drugs into the prison where he is at, and they are currently suggesting to add another 18 years onto his sentence, but this hasn't officially happened yet. And unfortunately, that is all I have on this case. There's no further information. The family still hopes one day that they will find some kind of truth in all of these stories. Some people say that when you lie, you stay close to the truth. So maybe in all of the stories that Joran had said, maybe there were some truths, little bits and pieces in there about what really happened. But hopefully one day the family will have some kind of closure. So I want to thank you all for coming to my channel today and listening to this case. Something important that I think we can take out of this is if you see something, say something. You know, in any case, the more information that you can get or say can really help out. And imagine if someone was to finally come forward and hear and let the family know what happened. That would be such a weight lifted off of this family. But yes, thank you again for coming to my channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day. All right, bye.